So when we continue to look at the TPACK model, we can combine the pedagogical and content knowledge, which is an understanding of how teaching strategies can complement the subject matter, or in other words, how teaching affects learning. When we think about PCK, we should think, what strategy should I use to best teach this information? Should I use graphic organizers? Should I use close reading? Should I have students make a visual representation? An effective teacher weighs the content and the instructional strategy so her students will learn best. In my lesson, I chose to use a HyperDoc as the vehicle in which the material is represented. This allows for individualized learning, voice, and choice. So in my lesson, I have students use Edpuzzle as part of exploring the information. So I chose this video to correct some misconceptions about the sizes of planets and stars. I have students that think that the moon is bigger than the sun because when they look up in the sky, they see the moon as physically bigger than the sun is. So in order to address that misconception, I use this video in which I embedded questions along the way. Another resource that I use is kind of like a mind mapping resource. So it's called VisuWords, and it allows students to have a better understanding of the key terms. And so when they see how some of the key terms are connected, I think it helps them make connections in their mind. So the next component, as we're bringing together components, the next step is the technological pedagogical knowledge. And as I mentioned before, learning is the goal, not technology. However, technology can vastly enhance learning. By having a good pedagogical knowledge along with a good knowledge of instructional technology, teachers can help students learn in ways they haven't been able to learn before. As Kohler states, this includes knowing the pedagogical affordances and constraints of a range of technological tools as they relate to disciplinary and developmentally appropriate pedagogical designs and strategies. In my lesson, I use instructional technology tools almost exclusively. I use a graphic organizer to help students best understand the relationship between key terms. Students are being given immediate feedback with the Edpuzzle videos, and students can categorize the key terms with the digital organizer that I showed before. With my example, it is very hard to take apart the components such as just technology, just content, or just pedagogy. And because they are so intertwined, again, it's very hard to see some of these things individually without seeing something else affecting it. So that leads me to the TPACK model. And as I appreciated the Venn diagrams that I've seen online, but this is a diagram that I created myself, and I think it helps me understand the TPACK model a little bit better. So we see that there's technology, there's content, and there's pedagogy. And then we see along each of the sides of the triangle those connections and how they each come together to make TPACK. And I believe that you can see throughout my HyperDoc how all three of these things are coming together. We are seeing students explore information, particular information, and the way that they are exploring that information through a technology tool will best help my students understand. For example, something I haven't already pointed out is that my students will be creating a project and they will be researching a celestial body that they choose. And I've asked them to use or to create a thing link. A lot of times I give my students a choice. I have a digital product menu board and I allow them to choose. But for this purpose, and because students are going to be looking at each other's, I thought it would be best if they all use the same tool. especially because sometimes I feel like the tool gets in the way of learning, and sometimes students go down a rabbit trail of the tool itself instead of going down the rabbit trail of learning. So once the students have completed their ThingLink, they are going to be looking at two other projects, two other student projects, and they will use an online matrix to compare and contrast them. So here's the Venn diagram that I've created on a Google Doc. It's obviously not a standard looking Venn diagram, but I like to use something like this, something like a matrix, because I think, for one, it allows students to write more, and two, I think that visually it's a little bit easier to read. So the students are going to look at the different ThingLinks from two other students, and then they'll be writing the alike things here, and then they'll be writing the differences here for the two objects. When they are done and they have looked at the two other projects and they've completed the compare and contrast matrix, they are going to be going to Flipgrid, which is a really great tool, a great online tool, and they will be giving verbal feedback using a video. So I have prepared different reflection questions for them to use, and when they go to the recap link, they are just going to type in this code, and they'll be given different questions like, what would you change now that you've looked at others? What were some obstacles that you came in contact to? So by using these different instructional methods, and I'll get to how the instructional methods and the classroom behaviors fit into my project as well, the students will be able to use technology, they'll be learning content, and I think that it will also help them with learning the material best through the pedagogy that was used in the instructional tools.